After the arrest of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro, the Trump administration moved to control and sell Venezuela's vast oil reserves, generating hundreds of millions of dollars. The administration says the policy protects U.S. security and redirects oil revenue away from foreign adversaries. But Democrats warn it lacks transparency and could enable corruption. Lawmakers are questioning the role of selected trading firms, the handling of oil proceeds, and possible conflicts of interest. As Secretary of State Marco Rubio prepares to testify before Congress, scrutiny is intensifying over U.S. oversight of Venezuelan oil, legal authority, and the broader implications for U.S.-Venezuela relations.
In the weeks following the capture of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro by U.S. authorities, the Trump administration has moved aggressively to sell off Venezuela's vast oil reserves, generating hundreds of millions of dollars and igniting concerns among lawmakers, policy experts, and industry insiders about transparency, legality, and the potential for corruption. Those concerns are expected to take center stage on Jan 28, when Secretary of State Marco Rubio is scheduled to testify before a Senate committee about the administration's expanding role in Venezuela. Democratic lawmakers, in particular, are preparing to question Rubio about the administration's handling of Venezuelan oil assets and a multi-billion-dollar deal that has shifted control of the world's largest proven petroleum reserves into U.S. hands. The Trump administration justified its actions by accusing Maduro of leading a massive international narco-trafficking operation. Last fall, the United States dramatically escalated pressure on Venezuela, deploying significant military assets to the region and carrying out deadly strikes on boats off the country's coast. Following Maduro's arrest and extradition to the United States, where he and his wife now await federal trial on related charges, President Trump announced that his administration would assume control over Venezuela's oil reserves. Those reserves, estimated at more than 300 billion barrels, have long been constrained by U.S. sanctions and maritime blockades that prevented oil tankers from leaving Venezuelan ports. Aside from limited operations by Chevron under special licenses, American companies were largely barred from accessing Venezuelan oil. With Maduro detained, the administration moved swiftly to unlock those stockpiles.
The Trump administration justified its actions by accusing Maduro of leading a massive international narco-trafficking operation. Last fall, the United States dramatically escalated pressure on Venezuela, deploying significant military assets to the region and carrying out deadly strikes on boats off the country's coast. Following Maduro's arrest and extradition to the United States, where he and his wife now await federal trial on related charges, President Trump announced that his administration would assume control over Venezuela's oil reserves. Those reserves, estimated at more than 300 billion barrels, have long been constrained by U.S. sanctions and maritime blockades that prevented oil tankers from leaving Venezuelan ports. Aside from limited operations by Chevron under special licenses, American companies were largely barred from accessing Venezuelan oil. With Maduro detained, the administration moved swiftly to unlock those stockpiles. Trump unveiled a sweeping $2 billion arrangement to sell oil held by Venezuela's state-run oil company, asserting that the United States would oversee both the extraction and the proceeds. In a January 24 interview with the New York Post, Trump said Venezuelan oil was already flowing into refineries in Houston. Quote, "Let's put it this way, they don't have any oil. We take the oil," he said. That framing alarmed Democratic lawmakers. Senator Chris Murphy of Connecticut accused Trump of attempting to redirect the proceeds to political allies and corporate supporters. Speaking on the Senate floor on January 7th, Murphy said that granting the oil industry unrestricted access to Venezuela's reserves would amount to an unprecedented power grab. By the time of Rubio's testimony, the administration will have already sold roughly $500 million worth of oil, according to officials familiar with the transactions. Some of the proceeds have reportedly been deposited in a Qatari bank account controlled at the discretion of the Trump administration, raising questions about oversight and legal authority. Democratic senators have begun pressing financial institutions for answers. Earlier this month, a group of lawmakers sent letters to executives at more than a dozen major banks asking whether the administration had requested their participation in holding or managing funds derived from Venezuelan oil sales. In a separate letter dated January 21, more than a dozen senators demanded that Trump officials disclose any personal or financial interests in companies involved in the extraction, processing, or sale of Venezuelan oil. The White House has rejected allegations of impropriety. Taylor Rogers, a spokesperson for the administration, said in a statement that Trump's actions had freed Venezuela from narco-terrorist control and prevented its oil revenues from benefiting foreign adversaries. She described the deal as historic, claiming it would restore prosperity and security to Venezuela while protecting U.S. economic and national security interests.
Despite those assurances, economists and legal experts warn that the framework governing the oil sales is opaque. On January 9th, Trump signed an executive order designating the revenue from oil sales as funds held by the U.S. government on behalf of the government of Venezuela. Reuters reported that 4 Venezuelan banks were given the first $300 million in proceeds, which were to be used to sell dollars to Venezuelan companies in need of foreign currency. Francisco Rodriguez, a senior research fellow at the Center for Economic and Policy Research, said the arrangement places Venezuelan funds outside the normal U.S. regulatory system. According to Rodriguez, it is unclear what legal standards apply to these assets, or who ultimately exercises authority over them. The administration granted licenses to 2 global trading firms, Vitol and Trafigura, to manage the initial oil sales. According to industry sources, other companies have expressed strong interest but have not yet received authorization. That selective licensing has drawn scrutiny, particularly given the companies' histories. The Financial Times reported that John Addison, a senior Vitol trader involved in securing the deal, donated $6 million to Trump's re-election campaign. Both Vitol and Trafigura have faced significant penalties in recent years for corruption-related offenses in Latin America. In 2020, Vitol agreed to pay $135 million to resolve U.S. charges tied to bribery schemes in Ecuador, Brazil, and Mexico. In 2024, a former Vitol trader pleaded guilty to paying bribes to officials at Mexico's state oil company. Trafigura, meanwhile, pleaded guilty to conspiring to violate federal anti-corruption laws and paid more than $126 million to settle allegations related to bribery in Brazil.
Vitol has denied any political affiliation, saying Addison's donation was made in a